morning, everybody. Happy, what we're on, day 11 of the Advent calendar, and welcome to the News Agenda with me, Fleet Street Fox. And today I'm joined by the Mirror's Showbiz Editor Features, Jessica Bolton. Morning, Jess.
Good morning. Hi, Susie. Lovely to see you again.
Despite the fact the alarm didn't go off this morning, but we'll find our way through this. Now, this is the People's Pay-Per-View, so get into the comments, ask us your questions. We'll do our best to answer them for you. Those of you listening later on podcast will just have to wonder how long it would be after shooting someone that you could stay on the run for. So what have we got for you today? Well, the Mirror has splashed on the hunt underway in Syria for the torture squads that abuse political prisoners for former dictator Bashar al-Assad. They have questions to answer about 157,000 people who've gone missing in the country's civil war that followed his crackdowns following the Arab Spring uprisings. Now, speaking of people being hunted, after a week on the run, the main suspect in the assassination of an American medical insurance company boss has finally appeared in court. And we now know a lot more about Luigi Mangione, don't we, Jess? In part because the US doesn't have the strict contempt of court laws we do here, preventing full details of the case being made public until after the jury's made its decisions. They have the right under the Constitution just to say whatever the hell they like, whenever they like. And so they do tend, the press over there, as soon as someone's get arrested, they go hell for leather on the backgrounds, which we don't get to do until after someone's been convicted. So what do we know about this guy so far?
Exactly. I mean, it's when you think about it, we can barely say anything so as not to prejudice a jury over here. But like you say, over in the States, it's different laws, which means that we can hear a lot more about the background. So he's 26, but he actually went to an Ivy League university. He went to University of Pennsylvania, which is one of the 8 Ivy Leagues. And he's obviously a very, very intelligent man. But what happened was he went there, he studied maths and computer science there. He then went off to be a data engineer in California and then Hawaii, was obviously at the top of his game. And he became ill with a chronic illness, according to some of his friends. And he was suffering from chronic pain, which they said led to his mental troubles as a result of that. So some of these friends have come forward already, sort of almost given these sort of mitigating circumstances, and they've said that could have led to this mental decline. And it was a chronic pain that came after he had some surgery. Now, this is what the friends are currently claiming. So obviously that will be forming a big part of this case, but he's claimed that he's done this as part of an ideological protest. So it's obviously going to be a very, very interesting case when this plays out. He's already got former teachers speaking on his behalf, into the press, saying about what an intelligent guy he was, and how sad this is to see it's come to this. It feels very much like he's going to be a very divisive defendant in a way.
Yeah, and as we've just seen there in some images of him being delivered by the Altoona County Sheriff's Department to court in Pennsylvania, he's very keen to express his opinion about things. The sheriff is trying to bundle him inside the courthouse, but he's happy to sort of shout at the waiting press and try and, not explain himself perhaps, but he's got some points to make. So, this guy seems to be hugely intelligent, as you've said, but he's also a bit of a fan of domestic terrorists trying to take down the system. The Unabomber, a chap called Ted Kaczynski, seems to be someone he idolised quite a bit. And after some botched surgery, apparently he had some kind of spinal injury while surfing. I've said it before and I'll say it again, sport is very bad for the health.
Always very bad, never ends well.
No, don't do it. So he had some kind of spinal injury. He had some surgery for that. It didn't work, and he was left in chronic pain. Now, I don't doubt that I could tell you right now he would have faced the kind of medical bill to correct that would be unachievable for anybody who isn't earning a £10 million a year salary as the CEO of a big medical insurance company. And that would mean he'd never afford it, and he would just have to live with chronic pain for the rest of his life. And he's just snapped. He's just gone. Yeah. Right? He's halfway there already, but that's it. He can't cope anymore. So, I mean, we talk, don't we, about America having more gun crime because it sells guns over the counter.
Yes.
Don't doubt this. So we go, well, this is, it happens all the time in America. If you make guns available, this is what's going to happen. People are going to get shot. But the one he was arrested with was a 3D printed handgun, including with a silencer as well.
Exactly.
Anywhere can do that. I mean, it's possible to download that stuff off the internet anywhere in the world, isn't it?
It brings up a whole load of other sort of terrifying questions on this, because yes, like you say, the normal argument with America is this leads to questions about the gun crime, availability of guns, background checks, all those questions that we regularly ask. And with Trump going back in January, that, these were all key questions. And I think people will probably thinking this was going to be a key case where you could be talking about this. But when we know it's what they call a ghost gun, which is this 3D printed gun that it can't be traced in a way, because it's got, it's been printed. It is, you can download these things. They have been found over here in the UK already. It's a whole different terrifying scenario. Obviously, we know that he comes from a computer science background. We know that he probably does have those kind of skills to be able to know about these sort of things on, the dark web that we've all heard about. The fact that this sort of thing is now available to people like this who have become troubled and taken something in a certain, have got these kind of issues is terrifying, Susie. I mean, really, it is. I mean, there's nothing, if you've got certain skills, what is there to stop other people doing things like this? What are the protections out there when things like 3D printed guns become available? And we've heard about them before, and we've heard about them in the UK already.
Yeah, and you bet your bottom dollar, can't you, that someone who can afford a 3D printing machine is happily selling it to the guys who are going to want the guns, and making a lot of money out of it. Now, what do you think, everybody? Do you feel that there's going to be something, I'm sure, coming out of this about the cost of healthcare in the US and privatized healthcare versus the nationalized system that we've got, and a few other nations have too? If you have a misaligned spine, if you've got problems in this country, you can get more surgery for it if you need that surgery. But there are plenty of people who still live in chronic pain.
Yeah, and the treatment, if I can say that, the treatment is not there. The provision is not there for a lot of people waiting already in this country. That is another big issue. There are a lot of people in chronic pain that can't get the help they need.
Exactly, and often spinal issues are the kind of things that really, they can only botch it up a bit or pin it. It's very difficult to fix spines when they go. So the problem is, the question, I suppose, is not how longer can you stay on the run, but what's going to happen to him, this guy. And they're trying to get him out of Pennsylvania at the moment. They call it extradition because they're trying to get him to New York, where the crime was committed, for a trial. But interestingly, there's no capital punishment in New York, whereas there is in Pennsylvania. Now, he's got a big fan base online already, Jessica. Not only the conspiracy theorists who are into the whole taking things into your own hands business, but also he's known as the hot assassin. There are lots of people who think he's pretty handsome. And that, his fan base is only going to grow really as he awaits trial. There'll be plenty of people who feel wronged by medical insurance companies as well in the States who will be backing him. And that's going to pay, you'd have thought, that kind of fan base for some very good lawyers, maybe draw a lot of attention when he does come to trial. Can you see him? I can see him, in a film, maybe Zac Efron playing him or something, turning him into some kind of Hollywood hero, especially if his legal team are going to be making the argument that the guy he killed somehow, did something terribly wrong to sort of deserve it in some twisted way. I can just see it being him turning into like a, man of the people type.
That's what I was meaning by very divisive kind of defendant at the beginning, because I think that is going to be the case. I think you're going to have this, the defense they can put up is, here's this guy who's been failed by the system. This has happened. He's snapped and he's done this dramatic thing. But you've got to remember, at the end of the day, he killed somebody. And that is that is the danger that you can see becoming overlooked, like you say, within the sort of narrative of this going forward. We can almost see it play out. And like you say, you can envisage couple of years down the line, I'm sure there's somebody already working on the screenplay for a Netflix limited series or a movie on this to talk about what happened. I mean, it was only a few years ago as well. Let's remember there was the controversy when there was the sort of idolization of the Boston bombers who made the front cover of Rolling Stone, and they were shot. Sort of the picture was sort of used of them in a very sort of almost rock and roll sort of style. And there was outrage about that at the time. But even since then, like with social media is sort of it exploded so much in terms of its influence and how it's spread even since then of the Boston bombing, that you can have these somebody like this can become very, very dangerous very quickly because of the followers that you'll have behind them, because of all of that. And they themselves can become very easily influenced, like you said, by, you know, certain groups, etc., online. That seems to me to be that all of that sort of side of the sort of indoctrination and falling off the wagon, going that way, and idolization of these people and people being able to back people is getting made a lot easier from the sort of the social media type sort of sides and what's available online at the moment, and the checks and letters, another whole big question too. I mean, when you look at it, if you look
that, they become a hero. You know, that's when he was arrested, he had a manifesto on him. Just trying, you know, he's obviously trying to he's not only get his point of view across, but try to inspire others as well. It's something that does and can happen, isn't it?
And it's terrifying when you look back at the Unabomber, and I mean, he had a manifesto, as we know, but I mean, a lot of his was he was writing to newspapers, and then he published his manifesto. But it was a different world, a different time. If he did that now, the amount of people who would have been able to read that, if that, you know, that manifesto goes online, it's just terrifying now. If you see it, is kind of like another example of how sort of all the sort of social media has absolutely exaggerated what can happen here. You know, the power that is with this, with Luigi now, and to potential to influence people is quite terrifying.
Yeah, and we saw as well with Anders Breivik, the mass killer in Norway. He posted his manifesto online, and I don't know if it's still up, but there are certainly copies of it knocking around, and it's possible to still see. And he has fans writing to him, and he's inspiring people still, even though he's locked up. Now, thank you for that, Jess. We'll have to see how Luigi's trial pans out, and indeed his future Hollywood career. I do hope that someone who's got an agent. Anyway, on to the main story of the day. And I've chosen today a story from Page 2, which is probably not going to be spoken about much today because there's other things going on in the today's news agenda. But it's going to be important in the next few weeks, I suspect. And it does have an impact on what's being discussed today. So it's a new report by homeless charity Shelter, which says there'll be 354,000 people homeless this Christmas. Now, many of them are going to be sofa surfing. They're going to be in temporary accommodation. They're not all on the street, but many of them will be living in daily fear that they will be, because there's very little between that situation and being on the street, isn't there, Jess? It's once you become homeless, even if you've got a roof over your head temporarily, you're only one step away then from being on the street, often with family.
It indeed, and in these figures from Shelter, they're saying that it's enough people to fill Wembley Stadium 4 times is how many people will be homeless this Christmas. And when you think about that it feels suddenly very real at that point. And it also includes 161,495 children. So that's, if you think your average school is probably 1,000 children max, you know, secondary school, you're talking about 100 schools worth of children who won't have permanent homes or secure homes this Christmas. And this is 2024 we're meant to be, a sort of leading country. We're meant to be a first world country. And those kind of figures are absolutely shocking and appalling. I mean, you look at the percentage of what that would be out of the population of the country, it's pretty high considering we've got like 60, 70 million now in the country. I'll have to double check what the final figures were. I know it was around that last time. It's probably gone up a bit, but so 354,000 is a sizable number. We're not. So it's I mean, there you are. If you're on a sofa, if you're, you might be staying with people on their good graces, but you can't. That you've got no security there, and it's very hard to get out of that, as you said, because there's an advert running at the moment where it's talking about you can't get a bank account if you don't have an address, and you can't get a job if you don't have a bank account. It's that kind of the knock-on effects of what this can mean for you. So there'll be 100 different ways that it can affect you because you don't have an address.
Exactly. If that's a situation in your childhood and you're struggling to deal with it, there's going to be long-term impacts as well. I mean, what do you think, everybody? Do you know anyone who's been rendered homeless, is going to be homeless for Christmas? And if you think it's fair and reasonable to count them in these kind of statistics, if they have temporary accommodation, if the council's provided them with something, even if it's not permanent, or if they're sofa surfing with friends, do you think perhaps these numbers are right or wrong or too big or too small? Get into the comments and let us know. Now, at some point, I don't doubt that somebody is going to say asylum seekers in hotels, which is the point that everyone would make about this. Now, as of June 2024, there were 50,000 asylum seekers in hotels in Britain. And we're talking about 7 times that many British people being homeless. And don't forget, it's the hotel owners raking it in, not the asylum seekers. They're not personally getting cash that we spend on those hotels. Now, if you kicked out every asylum seeker from the hotel, and gave that hotel room to a Brit who's homeless, you would still have 304,000 homeless Brits, right? Plus, you would find there are 50,000 asylum seekers homeless on the street suddenly, which is a guaranteed way to turn someone into a criminal and an addict. So, Jess, what's the solution here? This is down to, extortionate rent increases, family breakdowns, no fault evictions. It's causing lifelong harms. Simply moving asylum seekers sideways or something would not solve the problem in any way. What could we do? And how do we find a way around this?
I mean, that is obviously the question that a lot of people are trying to tackle. And as you say, the sort of the mental impact, the lifelong impact when you're talking about children who are with parents in this sort of situation, whether it's sofa surfing, temporary accommodation, we don't know exactly how that will affect people, but you can imagine that probably will play a part, or in many people can play a part. And we have the knock-on effect of knowing that there is no help, there is help if you've got mental health things, but it's very hard and very difficult, long process to access. So it's all a kind of a problem that spirals onto more problems that brings us into, care available, help available. And the issue is the cost of housing, like you say, rents have gone up through the roof. In the past couple of years, especially in the sort of post-COVID years, obviously landlords are feeling squeezed. That are passing that on. Rents have gone out of control. A lot of people not being able to afford them. I was previously in rented accommodation, and I'll tell you, and the rent would have doubled overnight, which is inconceivable for most people. No one can do that, unless you've been very lucky on the lottery. So a lot of people are finding themselves in this position through no fault of their own, and like you say, no fault evictions. We've got Labour now in. You'd hope that this would be a massive focus for them on the best way forward. And to be honest, what is the answer? Because people say, right, okay, I don't think you can start saying, okay, we shouldn't be putting asylum seekers anywhere, because what are we going to do instead? I don't know whether the hotels is a solution or whether there's a different solution for long term. As you say, it's the hotel owners who are getting the money from the state for this.
What do you think, everybody? Well, get into the comments. What's your solution for 354,000 homeless Brits, including 161,000 children? How do they get properly helped? Because, the social housing, which used to house people who were homeless, firstly, didn't have nearly this many homeless people to deal with. And secondly, it got flogged off. So we're a bit stuck there. Richard says those facing eviction, the numbers, they probably pale those figures too. Shouldn't we have universal basic income at working age sufficient for dignified living with postcard rental values intertwined? Nice idea, Richard. But if we had a universal basic income, let's say 12 grand a year, you would find that the rent was 15 grand a year.
Mm.
So, it just creates a new bottom for the market to some extent. Yeah. So it's not necessarily the solution. And we've got this issue also we have in this country where lots and lots of people have second homes and third homes that they do not spend very much time in. The average length of time someone stays in their second home is 2 weeks per year. It is the most expensive holiday they will ever take. And they still have a home somewhere that they don't ever live in, which I'm very keen on seizing personally. If I was running the country, Republic of Boniface, we'd just have all the second homes. Sod it, I don't care. Now, there's one story at the end of today's piece, which is quite indicative of the problems I think this involves. And it mentions a case study, a woman called Sally. Now, her husband died. She got evicted through no fault of her own. She paid her rent on time every month, but she just got evicted because, being a landlord was difficult and mortgages were going up and you can just evict someone for no reason. So she turned up from school run one day and the bailiffs were there and the locks were changed, and that was that. She and her autistic 14-year-old daughter were on the street for 8 hours with nowhere to go until a shelter and the local council got her temporary accommodation. Now, they moved into a room that smelt like a urinal and it was covered in pet hair, she said. Her daughter keeps running away from home. She's obviously had an awful lot to deal with, that 14-year-old girl, at just the wrong time in your life. She's lost her dad. She's lost her home. She's living in very difficult circumstances. Her mum is probably really quite stressed as well. This is the sort of catastrophic turn in life which can happen to any one of us through no fault of our own. You become ill. You just have a bad landlord. There we go. Picture of, I don't think it's the same person. This is a Samantha with her daughter Jasmine who's having some problems. But it's the kind of thing that can happen to any of us. And yet the best we've heard from the Labour government that you mentioned, Jess, is our plans, which are going to be announced, I think, today, about planning frameworks and so on. Angela Rayner is talking about building on low-quality green belts to have more homes and not worrying about the newts that block housing projects sometimes. Sally and her kid have got no chance of buying a new build home, regardless of what Angela Rayner thinks of the issue. And what's being done to help them? Because just simply building houses does not alleviate the homelessness situation. It's money, not lack of homes.
Yeah, of course it doesn't. I mean, the issue is, I think you'll find that there'd be very few people under a certain age who are in a position where they can buy a first home. So it's almost like that's almost a completely irrelevant point. I mean, unless they're talking about building more traditional social housing. But even then, we had years where there was a big stock of social housing, which was empty and unused. I used to live up in Hull, and there was for a long time there was a stock of housing that was actually not used, which could have housed people, but it wasn't kept up to a standard where they could actually then put people into it. And so it feels like it just needs somebody to take hold of this whole issue, really relook at it again, because we're still suffering from the fact that they sold off so many, obviously going back to the 80s. I think we can all agree that perhaps that wasn't the wisest of ideas at the time.
No, not without replacing it. And some councils are having to buy back some of that social housing, which is pretty difficult. Now, what do you think, everybody? I know there's lots of people in the comments talking about asylum seekers and send them back home, all that kind of stuff. That does not help 354,000 homeless people, okay? It's 7 times more homeless people than there are asylum seekers. So Forget that argument, right? It's not going to make any difference, not going to make any impact whatsoever on the fundamental problem. What are your solutions instead, right? What do you think the government should do? Is new house building the solution? Is rent caps the solution? Is it the solution to have more social housing and to build that before private housing? The story of Sally and her daughter means that it is a social issue for every single one of us, because if children grow up in difficult situations like this without a proper home, without any stability, they're the ones who are going to grow up to be a cost and a problem later on when they become adults. JC says, you're an island, you can't keep building. I think very few % of the British mainland is actually covered by houses. So it's not like we are running out of space, although people often say that. We do have a lot of protections, which Angela Rayner is talking about lifting. Is that the fundamental problem? Is it the fundamental problem we're relying on private house builders when, local councils perhaps should be doing some of this building and providing, reasonable homes for rent? Some of the issues, like Jess was talking about there, about having existing housing stock that's unfit for human habitation is because private landlords and social landlords have not been able to afford or have not bothered to maintain properties. So damp gets in, so therefore it becomes unhealthy, therefore you can't rent it out, therefore it's just sitting there.
And let's not forget how many people are still sat in houses and flats which have the cladding that still needs to be resolved. There are still thousands of people in homes that are still waiting for that to be resolved.
Exactly. So, you get into social housing and it might go up like a torch. There are better ways of handling all of this, and it's taking a hell of a long time. Meanwhile, Sally and her daughter and lots of other people like them, thousands and thousands and thousands, far more than there are asylum seekers, are having more problems. And we are not addressing that because some very small-minded people just want to say, oh, it's the people on boats, it's the asylum seekers, they're the big issue. Like, if you took all of that away and you fixed all of it and it all stopped tomorrow, you've still got 300,000 homeless Brits.
There's still two. You're
still spending billions on hotels because you've got to pay for the hotels for the British people now. This doesn't make any sense. It's daft. Anyway, what next on this issue do we think? Because we saw I think there's pictures in the paper today or earlier this week. Prince William keeps visiting homeless shelters and talking about homelessness. And I don't doubt he's raising the profile of that, but he does have about 3 or 4 houses himself, plus all of Cornwall. And the homeless problem is not getting any better while William is talking and doing this stuff. I haven't noticed it changing very much. In fact, it's probably getting worse. Angela Rayner's talking about this house building, but, that's not working either. Other nations have done wonders, Jess, creating like prefab homes that for the homeless, to keep them off the streets, keep them out of trouble, keep them in a position where they can have a bank account and a doctor and apply for work and so on and get back on their feet when they've had a big knock. Because in terms of the total cost to society, it is better to spend that money on them then than it is to wait for it all to go wrong and have
the knock-on effect. Yeah.
Why can't we invest in that? Why isn't there a political drive to stop blaming some brown people, a small number of brown people over there for something, and actually start going, do you know what, we have done this wrong, we need to do better, and we could do this or we could do that. Why aren't we investing in something that has been proven to work?
I think the thing is, you've got to look at, we've only just got the Labour government back in. It's not been long, so let's give them a little bit more time to come up with their plans of how they're going to tackle this, although they could have been prepared more. But anyway, let's give them a little bit more time to see what they're going to come up with. We know that in the previous situation with the Tories, this certainly, we wouldn't have held up much hope for a big sort of social thing like this. But in terms of sort of the projects that you were talking about, you hear about a lot of sort of projects that are happening in certain places. What there doesn't seem to be, you hear about shipping containers that get turned into homes that can be used in I believe there's a big project around Bristol around something like that. And you hear about all these different ones. Well, what you don't hear about is one big national kind of cohesive movement, as you say, one big plan, bringing it all together. I think sort of, I understand what you're saying about tying together the sort of asylum seekers and a sort of homelessness problem here, and a lot of people will make that kind of parallel, but it's almost like that is two very different issues for or people should see it as two very different issues, which is what you're saying, because you can't say that one is not, both have their problems. There'd be people out there who have had some effect from sort of issues with, they've been affected, their livelihoods, etc., because of something. So we can't dismiss it as being something people are worried about. But what we're saying is you can't blame a section of people who are not actually responsible for the fact that there's homelessness in Britain.
Exactly. Even if there were 300,000 asylum seekers in hotels, which there aren't, they're not the ones who created the problem.
Exactly.
Casey reckons all the homeless people could move into Buckingham Palace. It's big, but it's not that big. Leslie, and I think it was Debbie, was saying that all the empty homes and second homes needs to be reduced. That needs to be fixed. That seems to be a sensible thing that you could do. If you have an unoccupied building, you pay a tax on it. There you go. Bang. Half your problem solved straight away. Ricky on Twitter says, shouldn't be any British homeless. They should be given the hotels. The illegals should be booted out. Ricky on Twitter, you need to watch the goddamn show and listen to the stuff we've just said. Right. So we'll thank you for that. Thank you for your questions, everybody, and your comments. We will have to see what happens over Christmas. There will be some more stuff on this. I suspect when Angela Rayner comes out and starts announcing house building projects, there'll be journalists going, but... And there won't be a good answer for that. And there probably needs to be one. Now, we're running out of time, but we do need to have quickly. We're going on to some good news. We found some for you, and here it is. Now, we all spend probably far too much time doing the same things we always have. We're walking the same dog in the same fields, holidaying the same places, taking the same bus to work, whatever it is. Well, not Adam Waugh from Northumberland. He has not only hand-built a yacht from scratch in his garden shed, but despite the fact he's only ever sailed in British waters and once in France, he is about to embark on a round-the-world fundraising race covering all 7 oceans. Now, his ship, called Little Wren, is in Portugal at the moment. It's going to leave shortly for Antigua to start a 14-month, 28,000 nautical mile mini globe race, and which starts and ends in the Caribbean. Now, he is one of 15 people, there's his ship, taking part to raise money for the Ella Dawson Foundation in memory of a young woman who died from blood cancer. It's absolutely astonishing story, Jess. A very brave man, slightly bonkers. He reminds me of that chap, Tony Bullimore, who had to be rescued, I think, very quickly after starting out on a well-known race. I do hope Little Wren holds up to it and he's built it properly. But do you think, is this proof that if we all put our backs into it, we could change things for the better?
I think it is. I mean, isn't it? I mean, it's what a lovely thing to do, and what a lovely sort of story of somebody just going for it to try and do something for a really good cause, and try and do something for himself as well, because he sort of talks about how he's talked about how it's going to be a test of endurance and resilience. He couldn't be more excited, and I'm sure a lot of us reading this think, glad he's doing it. I wouldn't be doing that, certainly. Yeah. He's got to get across the Atlantic for a start. I don't think I fancy that, having watched Titanic a number of times.
I hope Little Wren's been built with rather more the right number of life jackets anyway for the people on board. I think his bigger problem would be the Southern Ocean, where waves can, 100 foot high, and that's going to be.
To be honest, when you're there in something that you've built in your garden shed, and you're coming across a great white in the ocean, I would be a little bit scared all round, to be quite honest. Yes. But, I mean, well done him if that's what he wants to do. And that's, I don't understand people that run marathons. I've done a half marathon, Susie, and honestly, I don't really understand why that either. But, so people doing an extreme endurance test like this, I mean, you've just got to applaud them. I mean, what a remarkable thing to set out to do. And even if it doesn't go as planned, it doesn't get as far as you want to, what an amazing thing to try and do anyway. So I wish him a lot of good luck from that, and very, very impressive to be building it in his garden shed. Much more impressive than anything I could build in my garden shed if I had a garden shed.
It'd have to be a hell of a big shed, wouldn't it? Well, well done, Adam, for giving it a go. We hope that Little Wren is seaworthy and that you managed to get it all the way across to Antigua in one piece. Fingers crossed. I'm sure Jeremy Armstrong, our reporter who's found that story, is going to be keeping track on it, and we'll find out more as he goes. If there are updates on his race later on, we will bring them back to you. Thank you, Jess, for taking us through all that. Thank you, everyone, for taking part. And we will see you again next Monday, I believe, for another edition of the News Agenda, which is probably going to be one of the last few we have before the Christmas break. So come back and join us for that. And later on, 12 o'clock on these channels, there will be Prime Minister's Questions. So come back and have a look at those and see what the Prime Minister's been up to as well. Thank you very much for taking part. Thanks again, Jess, and stay safe, everybody. We'll see you next Monday. Until then, take care. Tatty bye.